Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. More than 500,000 North Carolina taxpayers were overtaxed by the state this year. This is related to a major glitch in the Department of Revenue's tax system. Every day, the number of people getting incorrect bills is climbing. WRAL's 5 on Your Side team investigated the situation. In this episode, producer Pritchard Strong joins us with what they learned. Pritchard, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So first, let's start with the foundation of the problem. 526,000 people were sent a bill with a penalty that was incorrect. Can you explain this?
Yeah, and that number is actually continuing to climb every day. So when you file your taxes late, if you ask for an extension and you decide to pay late, that comes with a penalty. And last year, it was 10%. This year, they changed it to 5%. But essentially what happened was those bills were still going out with that incorrect 10% penalty rate. So people were seeing and getting a bill that was more than they actually owed.
And let's quantify that. What are we talking? Hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars?
It's all dependent on how much the person owes that year. It could be anywhere from $50 to hundreds of dollars and maybe in some cases thousands.
So you spoke to a man named Ron Whitaker who caught this mistake on his own bill. How did he figure it out?
So Ron Whitaker's an enrolled agent, so he's a tax professional, and this happened to him. He filed an extension, and he had that late payment that needed to be made and came with a penalty. And essentially, he caught it. He saw that he was being charged the wrong rate because he knew that what the adjustment was that the state had made to that tax penalty rate. So, when he's looking through his information, he caught it, he saw it, he flagged it, called the state and said, hey, this isn't right. This isn't what I'm supposed to be paying. And sure enough, they ended up adjusting it, and he did not incur an incorrect penalty in the end.
And of course, most of us are not tax professionals, so we might not spot something like that. We're going to talk more about that after the break. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. So are people kind of afraid to speak up in these situations? Not really trusting themselves when they look at their bill and see a mistake to say, yeah, that's a mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, we're not all tax professionals. So when you get a bill, a lot of times you're looking at it and saying, this is what the federal or state government's telling me to pay. And people are relying on that information. And it can be hard to question because, you have to go to an enrolled agent or pay somebody to get a consultation or something along those lines, and it can be expensive to try and figure out those problems. So in a lot of cases, people just end up paying what they get in a bill.
Okay, so we know other people have come forward other than Ron Whitaker. Do we have any idea how many people have come forward and if the DOR has paid them back?
We have a general idea, that 526,000 number that continues to climb, but we don't know how many people have come forward or how many people may have paid that penalty incorrectly. When we asked the Department of Revenue, they did not give specific numbers. They said that, $0 have been overpaid, but we also know that Department of Revenue is getting payments from people that are incorrect and they are filing reimbursements. So while in the end, maybe it does end up being $0, incorrectly paid, money is changing hands in the meantime. We just don't have an idea at this point of how much that looks like, how many people have overpaid at this point.
And how big that problem is. So one of the big concerns is that this was a change from 10% to 5% for the penalty. There is going to be, obviously, next year, another change. What is expected to happen and what are people concerned about regarding this same penalty?
So one of the questions we asked Department of Revenue was, is this going to affect next tax season, next tax year as they work to kind of fix this problem that's still ongoing? They said it's not, but the reality is next year they have to implement something that's even more complicated in the same area. It's something that they have tried in the past to implement and have failed to implement. They have a very old tax system in parts, their legacy tax system. Some pieces of it are up to 30 years old is what they've told us. So they say that it's not going to affect them next year. But again, a more complicated rate goes into effect next year. something that they have not been able to implement in the past. So it's just yet to be seen how this is all going to play out next year.
And of course, anytime we do stories like this about consumers overpaying, we need to give them some tips. I mean, what is it that all of us should be doing when it comes to our tax bills to protect ourselves?
So in this case, it's really reading through and looking for that penalty rate. First off, if you're somebody who has filed for an extension, you're going to pay late, this could affect you. So just know that off the bat. The rate that you should be paying on that is 5%. If the bill says 10%, that's incorrect. Now, these bills should be coming with an additional letter that explains this problem and says, if you got this rate, 10%, it's not right. Here's what you need to do. And that's to keep you from overpaying in the first place. Now, Department of Revenue has promised that in the end, people are not going to be overcharged. Even if you do pay too much, you are going to get that money back. You don't have to do anything.
So how do you file for a reimbursement, or they're automatically going to refund it?
They're saying that it's automatically going to be taken care of by them, that they are going to file those refunds to people who have overpaid. You don't need to do anything.
And to be clear, Ron Whitaker said he did not get that letter, correct?
He said that letter was not in the bill that he got. That notice that the DOR says that they are sending people, he says he did not get it.
So hopefully people listening to this, people watching your story on WRAL, will be able to take a close look at their bills so this doesn't happen to them.
Absolutely.
Pritchard, so since we recorded this episode, you now have an update. You've been able to speak with the Department of Revenue. What have they told you?
Yeah, they gave me a little bit more of a timeline about how long this issue is going to continue to go on for. They say that they hope to have it resolved by January of 2024. It is still ongoing. When I spoke with them, they weren't able to provide any more clarity on exactly how many people have overpaid or how much money kind of has exchanged hands, but they did emphasize that they are making refunds, they're making them available as quickly as possible. They say that in some cases they're turning it around in as little as 3 days to people who are overpaying by accident. So they are working as quickly as they can to try and make these overpayments right.
Any clarity on next year? What will happen next year with the changes?
Yeah, so that's where things kind of get a little bit more complicated. So we mentioned another tax change is due to take effect next year. It's a tax change that the Department of Revenue has tried and failed in the past to implement. And they tell me today they cannot do that change. They can't. It is still planned for July 1st of 2024 to take effect, but they cannot execute that change. They are in communication with the General Assembly to figure out how to move forward. If they do go forward with this change, at the very least, people should expect to get incorrect tax bills. As far as a solution, they don't have that yet, but they are still working through the issue, so stay tuned for updates on that.
Pritchard, thank you so much, and thank you for updating us, and I know you and your team will continue to follow this issue very closely. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us part of your morning routine. If you like what you're hearing, please rate us on Apple Podcasts or on whatever podcast app you use. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle News events and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.